Imagine being trapped in a metal coffin as flames consume everything around you. The temperature inside reaches 800 degrees. Your lungs fill with toxic fumes from burning plastic and fuel. Your racing suit melts into your skin. This isn't a nightmare. This was reality for one Formula 1 driver on August 1st, 1976. As he lay in the hospital bed, his face unrecognizable from third-degree burns. A priest was called to deliver his last rites. The doctors gave him a 20% chance to survive the night. His family was told to prepare for the worst, but they didn't know who they were dealing with. Just 42 days later in Monza, Italy, the same man was strapping himself back into a 400 horsepower Formula 1 car. Blood seeping through his bandages. Raw skin grinding against his helmet, fighting through pain that would keep most people bedridden for months. Why? Because he had a championship to win. This isn't just another crash story. This is about the day that should have ended Niki Lauda's life, and instead turned him into a legend. About a man so determined, he turned what could have been his obituary into just another chapter in his incredible history. But to understand why this crash changed Formula 1 forever, we need to go back. Back to when racetracks were death traps, when driver safety was an afterthought, and when a young Austrian decided to defy his family's banking dynasty to risk it all in the most dangerous era of motorsport. You know how modern Formula 1 cars have those sleek cowls protecting the drivers? Yeah, the 70s didn't have any of that. Imagine strapping yourself into what was essentially a tiny fiberglass bathtub filled with highly flammable fuel, wearing a flimsy helmet and some fireproof pajamas that weren't really fireproof. But here's the thing, this was considered the golden age of Formula 1, and let me tell you why. This was an era where drivers would race on Sunday, party all night, and somehow show up ready for testing on Monday, where cigarette companies plastered the logos on everything that moved, and drivers actually did their own mechanical work on the cars. Can you imagine Lewis Hamilton today, wrench in hand, adjusting his own suspension? Yeah, me either. Enter our protagonist, Niki Lauda. Now picture the most stereotypical Austrian banker you can imagine. Neat hair, perfect posture, speaks like he's calculating differential equations in his head. That's what the Lauda's family expected young Niki to become. After all, when your family runs one of Austria's largest banks, you don't exactly dream of becoming a race car driver. But Niki, he looked at that cushy banking future and said, "Nah, I'm good." Instead, he did something absolutely bonkers. He took out a massive loan, using his life insurance as collateral. His family was so angry, they completely cut him off. But here's where it gets interesting. While other drivers were out partying and living the playboy lifestyle, Niki was, well, let's just say he was different. He approached racing like a scientist conducting experiments. They called him the computer, not because he was particularly tech-savvy, it was the 70s after all, but because he was methodical to an almost obsessive degree. By 1973, he literally bet his life to get into racing, and it paid off. Ferrari came calling. At Ferrari, he was like a kid who finally found his perfect playground. He would spend hours testing the cars, making tiny adjustments, pushing for improvements. In 1975, this obsession with perfection earned him his first world championship. Ferrari had found their golden boy. But 1976? That was different. This was the year everything changed. Enter James Hunt, the British playboy, the exact opposite of Lauda's in every way. While Niki was analyzing tire compounds, Hunt was, well, let's just say he was enjoying the rockstar lifestyle. The rivalry would become legendary, but nobody could have predicted how it would unfold. As we headed into that fateful German Grand Prix, Lauda was leading the championship. He had a massive 23-point lead. And remember, this was when he only got 9 points for a win. He was methodically marching towards his second title. But sometimes, even computers make fatal errors. And the Nurburgring? Well, they didn't call it the green hell for nothing. This was about to become the scene of one of the most horrific crashes in Formula 1 history, and one of the most incredible comebacks the sport has ever seen. The Nürburgring. Even today, drivers get goosebumps just hearing the name. But in 1976, this wasn't just any track. Imagine a 14-mile serpent of asphalt winding to dense German forest with around 160 corners that would make a rally driver nervous. And here's the kicker. While modern F1 tracks have run-off areas the size of parking lots, the Nordschleife had trees. Just trees. Hit the barrier, you're meeting a tree. Go wide, say hello to another tree. August 1st, 1976. Race day dawns, and Mother Nature decides to make things interesting. The track is wet. Not the kind of wet that makes you grab an umbrella. That treacherous, patchy wet that drivers absolutely hate. You know, the kind where every corner is a surprise party and you're never quite sure if you're going to find grip or end up doing an impromptu ballet performance in front of thousands of fans. Here's where it gets interesting. Niki, our favorite calculating Austrian, does something completely out of character. He calls a driver's meeting. Now imagine being so worried about track conditions that the computer is the one suggesting they're gonna race. That's like having your accountant tell you your investment strategy is too conservative. It just doesn't happen. But here's the thing about racing drivers. They're not exactly known for backing down from a challenge. When the vote comes in, the majority wants to race. Even James Hunt, Lauda's chief rival, votes to continue. The show must go on, right? Lauda's sitting in his Ferrari before the start, and let you paint you the picture. The 312 T2. Arguably the most beautiful Ferrari F1 car ever made. The flat 12 engine singing behind him. 500 horsepower of Italian engineering excellence. But something doesn't feel right. The air is heavy, the track is treacherous, and Niki, the man who calculates everything, is racing against his own better judgment. The formation lap begins. These cars, they're basically rockets with wheels. No traction control, no stability management, no fancy electronic gates, just raw, unfiltered horsepower. Being wrestled around by pure talent and courage. And when I say wrestled, I mean it. These cars would try to kill you if you showed even a moment of weakness. First lap goes by. Lauda's running in the points, doing what he does best, being methodical, precise, calculating. This is where his nickname really shows. Every corner, every breakpoint, every apex, attacked with surgical precision. Second lap approaches. The track is starting to dry in places, but it's still treacherous. Drivers are beginning to push harder, feeling more confident. And that's exactly when racing becomes the most dangerous, when conditions are mixed, when the line between confidence and overconfidence blurs. Just before the Bergwerk corner, one of the most demanding sections of the track, Lauda's Ferrari is approaching at full speed. What happens then changes Formula 1 forever. You know those moments in life where everything seems to happen in slow motion? This is one of them. Approaching Bergwerk corner at around 140 miles per hour, Lauda's Ferrari suddenly snaps left. Just gone. No warning, no gradual loss of control. Just a $500,000 Italian thoroughbred deciding it wanted to be a lawn ornament. Now there's been decades of debate what exactly went wrong. Some say it was suspension failure. Others blame a tire that had enough of life's challenges. Niki himself? He would tell you it was mechanical failure. But honestly, in 1976, finding the exact cause of a crash was like trying to solve a puzzle while wearing oven mitts. Possible, but not exactly precise. The Ferrari hits the embankment like it's auditioning for a Hollywood movie. But here's where Hollywood gets wrong. Real crashes aren't clean or choreographed. The impact is so violent, it throws the car back onto the track like a child's toy. And remember those safety features I mentioned earlier? Yeah, about that. The fuel tank ruptures. Now, modern F1 cars have special foam-fueled tanks that prevent massive fuel spills. But in '76, the Ferrari was basically a very fast Molotov cocktail. The car erupts into flames, and I mean erupts. We are talking about temperatures hot enough to melt a helmet. But wait, it gets worse. You know how every time you get in your car, you do a little seatbelt tag to make sure it's secure? Well, during the impact, Lauda's seatbelt mounting points had partially failed. He is now trapped in a burning car, unable to get out. This is where the real heroes enter our story. Arturo Merzario, Guy Edwards, Gerald Erlt, and Brett Langer. 4 drivers who stopped their cars and ran towards burning wreck. Think about that for a second. These guys weren't firefighters. They were competitors who ran straight into the inferno to save their fellow driver. Merzario, this crazy brave Italian, actually reaches into the flames. The heat is so intense it's melting parts of his own racing suit. But here's the kicker. He paid attention during a safety briefing about Ferrari's seatbelt release system. A briefing most drivers skip because, well, it wasn't exactly as exciting as qualifying, right? That little detail probably saved Niki's life. 55 seconds. That's how long Niki was trapped in that inferno. Each second feeling like an eternity as he breathed in toxic fumes from burning plastic, fuel, and his own racing suit. By the time they pulled him out, his helmet had melted onto his face. The crazy thing, through all of that, Niki was conscious. He actually walked to the ambulance before collapsing. Think about that. The man literally walked away from his own funeral pyre. Though, as he'd later say with a dry Austrian humor of his, the walk was more of a stumble, but it sounds better to say I walked. When they got him to the hospital, the doctor faces said it all. 3rd-degree burns to his head, face and hands. His scalp was so badly burnt that his trademark cap today isn't just a fashion statement, it's literally holding parts of his head together. But the real danger? That 55 seconds breathing in toxic fumes had absolutely destroyed his lungs. Now, here's where it gets mind-blowing. The doctors being doctors decided to be straight with Niki. 20% chance of survival, they said. Niki's response? He basically told death to come back later because he had a championship to win. I'm not even joking. The man was laying there, literally fighting for his life, and he was asking about championship points. Remember that priest who came to give him his last rites? Niki later said he was angry at the priest because he had no intention of dying. Imagine being so stubborn that you're mad at someone for assuming you might die when you're, well, literally dying. That's Niki Lauda for you. Even death needed an appointment. The treatments were brutal. They had to vacuum his lungs every few hours, a process so painful it would make most people reconsider their life choices. But Niki, he turned it into a game. He'd look at the clock and time how long he could go before nipping the next session. Always the calculating computer, even in intensive care. His wife Marlene was by his side through all of this, and let me tell you, she was as tough as he was. When the doctor suggested plastic surgery to reconstruct his face, she told them to just focus on keeping him alive. Niki would later joke that this saved him twice, once by avoiding unnecessary surgery, and once by proving his wife didn't marry him for his looks. But here's the part that really shows you what kind of person Niki Lauda was. Just a day after regaining consciousness, he had his friend bring him a mirror. Now, most people would be devastated seeing their injuries. Niki looked at his reflection and said, "This damage is worth a world championship." That's it. No drama, no self-pity, just pure racing driver logic. And while all this was happening, the F1 circus kept rolling. James Hunt was closing the gap in the championship. And every time someone brought Niki the racing news, his heart rate would spike so much the nurses had to stop telling him the results. Remember how I told you this wasn't just a survival story? Well, buckle up, because this is where it gets absolutely insane. Just 42 days after his crash, yes, you heard that right, 42 days, Niki Lauda walked into the Monza paddock. Now picture this, the entire paddock goes silent. Here is a man who should be dead, or at least in a hospital bed, but he's just casually strolling in like he's been on vacation. The only difference, his red Ferrari racing suit now had to accumulate various medical tubes and bandages. But here is the best part, he didn't just show up, he qualified fifth, with bandages that would soak through with blood during the race. I mean, most of us call in sick for a paper cut, and this guy is out here wrestling a 500 horsepower Ferrari around Monza, while literally still healing from third-degree burns. But the story doesn't end here. Despite missing 3 races, Lauda went into the final round at Fuji, still leading the championship. One problem though, it was raining, like Noah's Ark levels of rain. And guess what? This time Lauda did something nobody expected. He retired from the race, saying it was too dangerous. The man who survived hell decided that leaving was worth more than a title. The long-term impact? Well, for starters, F1 safety was completely revolutionized. Fire-resistant suit that actually, resist fire, better barriers, medical facilities at tracks. But more than that, Lauda proved something incredible. That human spirit is basically unstoppable when it decides to be stubborn enough. He went on to win 2 more world championships, start his own airline, because apparently cheating that once wasn't exciting enough, and became one of F1's most respected figures. Those scars, he wore them like badges of honor. He even turned down full reconstructive surgery saying, "I had an accident, so what?" Talk about owning your story. Today, every time you see a driver walk away from a crash, thank Niki Lauda. Every safety improvement in modern F1, that's part of his legacy. But you know what else is crazy? There's still debate about what actually caused Lauda's crash that day. Some say it's suspension failure, others blame the tires. What do you think happened? Drop your fears in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on one of F1's greatest mysteries. And if you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing, it would mean a lot.